Hello and welcome to Cardiff Central Podcast. As ever, I'm Harley. I'm joined by Carwyn. How are you doing, Carwyn?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Rushing in between interviews today, but this is a good one to come onto the back of.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no Dan today. I don't know. Didn't really give a reason why, but I think maybe he's still hungover celebrating his varsity win. But we are joined by the more than capable uh, Craig Manson from the Scottish Rugby Pod. How are you doing,
Hi,
Craig?
I'm well. How are you? It's nice to be back on. I think the last time I saw Carwyn was a few beers into being at Wales, Scotland, and I haven't met you in person yet, Harley. But the last time I talked to you was on the pod, yeah. So it's nice to be back.
I was saying
Yeah.
to Harley the last time I saw Craig was I was sending him in the vague direction of a taxi rank and hoping he made his way home safely.
We managed to make our way through the humanity that is Cardiff after a Six Nations game.
It is something I both miss and don't miss in equal measures. Unfortunately, I was going down to Devon that night. I think I actually was playing rugby that weekend, which is a rarity. Being this one of those second teamers who only gets a game when literally no one else can because I'm that crap. Anyway, let's get into it. So as fun as reminiscing about Six Nations is, we'll get onto that in a bit later. So just a couple of little bits of Cardiff news. Firstly, Owen Lane, after starting up as a wee lad, has decided to part ways with Cardiff at the end of the season. He's moving to Valence Roman in the Pro D2. Um, I think that's gonna be a great. I think that's gonna be a great game for him. He doesn't mind a bit of rough and tumble, and there's some fantastic players out in the Pro D2 at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's not the best sign that it's a team right at the bottom of the Pro Day, and that's where he's going. The general consensus was they've just secured their safety in the Pro Day for next season, and now the announcement has been made. So make of that what you will. I don't know if he had a clause in his contract where he didn't go if they went down to the Pro de Trois. I assume there's a Pro de Trois.
No, it's the Nationale.
The
Nationale one.
National. Thank you. That's a gap in my knowledge that's come very early in the pod. Yeah, I think it makes sense. He's a big busty winner. They like them down there. Obviously, a big loss for Cardiff, and I think when we went through that list of players for next season and things like that, we thought there's someone going here, and I do feel a little bit on the sense of that video that we saw where it mentioned Josh Adams, mentioned Mason Grady. Maybe that's a hint that they're staying next season, but Owen Lane is the one who's missed out, sadly.
Yeah. Also, you also had the thing when Jockey was talking about his ideal back three setup and the wingers. He name checked Josh Adams, he name checked Grady. He didn't. Lane was one of the more notable admissions
Yeah.
to sing that. I mean, have you must see Owen Lane play a couple of times against Edinburgh. Any thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, I think it's more of a general. I think obviously he'll be missed by Cardiff. I think it's always good to have depth in your back line, and he is just as you say, he's a strong player. He's got a lot of what's the word? He's got a lot of go forward. He'll take a couple of tackles. He'll shake off a couple of tackles when he's going forward. So you always need players like that, especially, for example, when it comes to the Six Nations window. If he isn't getting anywhere near Wales, then it's good to have these people there just so that you've got high performance that you can count on for the URC. But the money that's in French rugby at this moment in time, having players like him going over to the Pro de Deux, it shows a lot. It shows the money that's in these teams, and also the fact that someone of his quality has been, what's the word? Enticed to go over there. You'll no doubt have a nice house resort, a nice flat or house sorted out for him, and a bit of time in a different country. A lot of people will find that very hard to turn down.
It's an interesting one as well. Sorry, I just jump in, but you mentioned his go forward. You mentioned his size, athleticism. You think of him. Is it a case of an unfulfilled potential? Sounds harsh for a guy who's won Wales caps and played X amount of appearances for Cardiff. But when he broke into the scene, first of all, I thought he had a potential of getting into that Wales team and being a starter in that Wales team, despite the strength and depth that we had at the time. and it's not quite worked out for him. I know injuries have played their part. I know probably the strength of Wales's back three at times has played its part, and maybe his deficiencies or areas that he needed to work on were areas that the managers at the time were particularly critical of. You know, you think of defensively, it's never been his biggest strength, and that's probably something that Gatland's always prided himself on: wingers that can defend really well, particularly Josh Adams. So yeah, it's a bit of a sad one, I think, in that element that perhaps we haven't seen the Owen Lane that could have been, in a way. And I'm not saying this is the end of his career going to the Pro D2. He could go on to win, 200 caps in the Pro D2. That's how young he still is. But it's perhaps a bit sad that we haven't seen it at its best in a Welsh regional or Welsh international shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it is. I mean, it's probably a bit of a problem across all the regions. I mean, when you look at it, and I mean, it's always a boring topic going back to budgets. But when you actually look in National One, oh no, sorry, it's not National One. I was wrong. It's Federal One. I just remembered that, so I got it. I corrected you wrongly there, Going. Even some of the Federal One teams are fully professional and on budgets akin to the Welsh side. So you are fighting a losing battle there.
Yeah,
I mean, Lane Train, you'll be missed. Sorry,
yeah, I think so. I think it just the problem you have, and whether I'll mention the unmentionable, which is the Premiership, the English Premiership. But you look at the English Premiership and you look at the French game. There are players there of quality, of high enough quality, that would play for Wales or play for Scotland or play for England, whatever, but they don't get the opportunity because there are people ahead of them, or a coach likes them better, whatever. But those players seem to be satisfied enough or paid enough, or whatever you want to call it, to play in front of their fans, week in, week out. And I think the big issue we have, especially in the URC, is there's an awful lot of players out there who miss out on international caps, so they then start looking elsewhere, and they go to Premiership, they go to France, and the URC misses out a little bit. We have the same issues in Scotland as Wales do, but I think it's very difficult to watch, especially when Cardiff, Ospreys, etc., have all been at high levels with some fantastic players, and currently they are being gutted at the moment. It must be painful to watch.
Yeah, Rhys Carre is a clear example, isn't it? He came out quite openly over the weekend and said that if he was getting Wales opportunities, he probably would have stayed, but because he wasn't, he decided to up and leave, and can't really shoot them down for doing that. You look at the situation with Rhys, and I don't mean this as a slight to County Mathias, but how on earth is County Mathias ahead of Nicky Smith and Rhys Carre is beyond me. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those two have since looked at it, whether it was since looked at it or looked at it at that moment and went, hold on a second, what the hell's going on here? That I'm fourth choice for my country, despite being, Rhys Carre scores tries for fun and is something different to anything Wales have got. And then Nicky Smith is making, I think last week I said on the podcast, making Mal Herber look like Scott Andrews. But I think
that's mean to Bubba. I mean, you're right, but don't be mean to Bubba.
But that's I think that's the frustration, isn't it? For these guys, if you feel slighted in any way now, there's very little to keep you there. And yeah, why not try pastures new and get the money while you still can, while you're still 25, 26 and plus, and instead of when you're in your 30s and trying to play and trying to find a place that will take you. It's a sad reflection of where we are, but that's the situation.
Yeah, and in his statement, he said, how excited it was for him and his partner to go move on. I don't think he has a kid yet, which actually, if you're going to move around when you don't have kids, is probably the time to do it. It's a little bit easier. I mean, I'm still in the middle of trying to get a move, to organise a move from Devon to Cardiff, and that's enough hassle with trying to sort of take childcare arrangements and the like. So yeah, I mean. Yeah, if you want to be moving around different countries, that's a good thing. So I think part of the Lane chat there, Moving on. So the Celtic Challenge has been renewed for another season. So this time it's going to be a 10-round competition. So everyone plays everyone home and away, which I think saying we've all agreed. So that's going to start in December, finish sort of March time, just before the Women's Six Nations. How are we both feeling about that? Craig, do you want to go first as the guest?
Yeah, I'm over the moon with it. I feel it's something that all the women's teams need. We need professional or semi-professional women's teams. We need to build up a URC style competition, so that so that the Welsh players, the Irish players, the Italian players can have access. I don't obviously the Italians aren't involved in the Celtic Cup, but challenge. But all these players can build up and get and bring us on. I've got a couple of friends or girls I coached prior to them moving up to higher level rugby who play for Edinburgh, and they say the difference in rugby that they get playing in the Celtic Challenge compared to what they get playing in the youth system is different level, and it's brought them on, and we've seen a couple of players come through from Edinburgh and go into the Scotland squad this week, this year, this Six Nations. So I think it's definitely something that's proving a successful thing for Scotland, and I'm sure it's proving a successful thing for the other for Ireland. I know, well, especially Ireland, considering where they were. They were in the bushes and in the weeds last season, and all of a sudden they've come back and shown everyone a little bit of given everyone a little bit of a humbling. So I think the Celtic Challenge is more power to it, and I'm really, really pleased to hear it's going from strength to strength.
Yeah, I was hoping they were going to be excluded this year. No, in all seriousness, yeah, it is great, and although it does grate on me, the fact that now we've got a good women's side to go with the great men's side, it is great to see, and Ireland needs a good women's side, and Scotland need a good women's side, and Wales need a good women's side as well. And the Celtic Challenge has been a stepping stone. Having a few chats over the last couple of weeks with people involved in the game and in different levels about the game, you speak to people in the player pathways and how crucial it's been for them that they can send these girls on that have been in the age grades zones. Your Gwennan Hopkins, your Shan Jones, your I've forgotten the name of one player, but she played for Bristol Thunder at 6 on the weekend, and apologies, I've forgotten, but she came through the Swansea Academy system, and now she's having the opportunity to play in the back row with Al Cal and Sinead Harries. And how amazing is that? You're playing with two professional rugby players who have done it at World Cups, been there, done it at Six Nations, and you're only going to learn from that possibility and that opportunity. I think what's going to be interesting going forward is whether clubs in England continue to let their players filter in, and especially their academy players, into the system, because you look at somewhere like Loughborough Lightning or maybe Gloucester, they've now got their own systems in place. You've got your Bucks, you're building through your Bucks academy, and then your academy underpins everything that goes into your club side. Do they really want to be sending academy players that are in their system into a different program that they aren't learning the same skills, aren't learning the same structures? They're doing something completely different for a longer period of time now. And it'll be interesting to what happens. They might be open to say, your third choice props who aren't playing much rugby, or your third choice centres. That's a different kettle of fish. That's players that they're established and they think, okay, they can go down and have an opportunity and have a chance to play and get some minutes under their belt, and then, we'll drag them back like they have this season when they need players. But it's just going to be interesting what they do with the academy players and the collegiate players now going forward, because if you've got your system set in place and you've got your structures, you've got your top down plans, and your training plans around that as well, having another club that offers different training plans that might not fit everyone's plan of action going forward. But I do think it's a good thing. Sorry, that was the negative. That's just an interesting, I think, thing that's going to be going forward about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like, but given how we've alluded to the success of the Irish team, where it was both their teams are basically the core, and they almost use it as a selection meeting. Where Scotland less so, and definitely with Wales, it was used more for fringe players, and we didn't really see as many step up as we maybe would have liked. And maybe there'll be a change of tack from the Scottish and Welsh unions to start
Yeah,
putting in that a bit more seriously,
I
because
think
having that cohesion seemed to work.
yeah, I think you're right. I think we did for us. We had Edinburgh especially was very much a lot of, and also with Glasgow, very much players that are fringe players who two players that I know. Adele Ferry, who plays in second row. She's someone who's older, has come through the system, played league rugby, not rugby league, but in the leagues, etc. Played for my team in the National One League, and decided that she wanted to try and get herself into a Premiership club to get more experience and have a higher level of rugby, because she is a quite a phenomenal athlete, and so she's had this second chance of actually. She was going to give up rugby, and she's had the second chance to come back, and she's been given the chance to go and play for Edinburgh Rugby, and she's loved that. And then there's Molly Pullman, who you'll see as a prop within Scotland, because she's in Scotland age grade, and she is phenomenal, and you'll see her come through eventually. So she's come through the grade system, and someone who if you cut her arm off, she bleeds orange and blue. So she's an Edinburgh fan as well as an Edinburgh player now. So there's two people who are totally opposite sides, but they're getting the opportunity with Edinburgh. The issue you've talked about. Most of Scotland's players are playing professional rugby in England or in France, so they didn't really get the opportunity to come and play for Edinburgh or Glasgow. Edinburgh did very, very well. The reason Edinburgh did very, very well is they brought in Claire Cruikshank, who is heavily involved with, or was heavily involved with Edinburgh University, and so she's brought in. She knows everybody in Scottish rugby, women's rugby, and so she's brought in a team that has performed very, very well, and she's an incredibly good coach as well. So I think they've done well for the first little bit. It's how, just as you say, Carwyn, it's how they move forward, and how this is going to work. I think ideally it's going to be a situation where we eventually go professional. Both Glasgow and Edinburgh go professional, and we try to keep our players here rather than England. But the problem you have is we need to give them the competition, etc., that they need so that they'll perform at the international stage, and what they're the competition that they're getting playing for England or playing in England or in France.
Yeah, just a bit about the Welsh thing, and the rumor I heard was there was a plan to hopefully get a third Welsh team in there, and I was I say rumor, it was from a source basically, but the if the plan, and it seems to marry up, because at the moment I don't know how much Craig knows, but we've got 3 PDC centres, player development centres now: East, West, and North Wales, which is RGC. Based out of Cardiff Uni, Swansea Uni, and then you think about, you've got your East and West Celtic Challenge. Well, you want your North Celtic Challenge region really to represent, to be similar. So the fact that it's gone home and away, to me, then says, is there enough scope to add another bunch of games? Because if you're adding a third Welsh team, you're adding a third Irish team. You're maybe adding a third Scotland team, depending if they feel they've got the budget for it, if they feel they've got everything for it. So that's another, what, 9 games a season. So it starts piling up, and that's where it gets interesting. And I feel only then you Craig said it earlier about Italian teams. Well, then they'd want a bit of a piece of the pie, and whether they get involved as well, that'll be the interesting thing going forward. And I think that's where the professionalism comes into it, isn't it? That's when, once you get to that stage where you're starting to have where you move it from being a challenge to a league, basically, because it's a Celtic challenge. It hasn't been called a Celtic League. If it's Celtic League, then I think that's when it starts going into professionalism, and then perhaps we're talking more about Welsh players staying in Wales as opposed to going across the border.
But again, you got to, sorry, we're moving, this is still news, and so, and I know that we've got a few things to talk about, but just the big thing though is and this is where everyone really has to watch themselves, is we don't want to replicate the men's game, and we are all seeing the problems that I've had. For example, we had 3 professional teams in Scotland, and we had to get rid of one. The budget's not there. The budget's not there for a Scotland team, or I don't know about, certainly not a Welsh team, I don't think at the moment, an international team. So, or to pay them at the right, what I feel is their worth. So I think really to start talking about maybe a third Welsh team this early goes on the graces of the women who are playing for that team, who are maybe only getting expenses, or maybe only whereas I'd far rather they concentrate on keeping 2 teams in Scotland, 2 teams in Wales, 2 in Ireland, and paying them correctly and developing them. That would be my preference. I don't mind them going home and away. That's fabulous, but let's start paying them properly, and then and putting in academy systems, etc. Once they do all that, then you can look at other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't remember when you were on here last time. We were discussing this, and both, I think we were all pretty much agreed that we didn't really want the number of teams to go up, but the home and away was definitely, I think, certainly for me and a few other people I've been talking to, that was a bit of a non-negotiable, because the format just seemed very, very weird and strange without it.
Yeah.
And now it's a bit thing. Interestingly, they've gone for just a league winner, so top of the log wins, no playoffs, which actually, to be honest, I'm quite happy with anyway. I think more competition should just be happy having a league, and then if you want to do a knockout stage afterwards, do it as a separate comp. I still think URC should bring back the Rainbow Cup for do that as if all 16 teams knockout. But
the one great thing about having it as a league setup and a closed league setup is there's no jeopardy. And for what it is currently, which is a developmental competition, maybe further down the line you bring in playoffs, but at the moment it's a developmental competition. It encourages teams to play their youngsters, and it's not sort of saying, oh, you have to play. You want your 15 best players on the team, and I understand that, but at certain times it's not saying, right, oh, I'm not going to give this player an opportunity because I'm worried about this jeopardy of being relegated, or I'm worried about not making the top 4. I think it's quite a good system that they've got. Gone for just a league winner, and then if there's no jeopardy at the end of the season, then so be it. But then becomes a developmental opportunity for young guns coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you'd like to say that one, Craig, or shall we move on?
No, I'm happy enough with that.
I'm gonna jump ahead of the order a little bit, just because I feel like it flows a bit more naturally. But obviously, we had the final weekend of the Women's Six Nations this just gone. I was at Wales, Italy, and we saw the celebrations. I'll leave other pods to discuss that one. Personally, the players have every right to express their emotions, how they feel. I personally wouldn't be celebrating that loss, but again, I'm going to leave that on players. This isn't the sort of pod for discussing that.
Just say one on it, just one simple one on it.
You can go whatever you want with that one.
Don't think Johan Cunningham's emotions were disingenuous. That's the one thing I will say on it. I've seen some people say, "Oh, he was crocodile tears," and I don't think that at all. I thought it was completely genuine.
I'm thinking the exact other way. I think that's a man who's relieved that he's keeping his job.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that one. I think anyone who's talking like that hasn't coached a team, hasn't been in that position. You get involved, you invest yourself in a team, and the sheer relief, because I can guarantee there's been a fair bit of pressure on his shoulders because Wales expects, if you know what I mean, and Wales have been on an upward arc, and then all of a sudden it seemed to stall. Yeah, I think the problem I have is that I don't know if any of you've watched Moneyball with Brad Pitt, but
great film.
When he comes in and they're dancing in the changing rooms, and they've got the music on, and they're just lost, and he just goes nuts and smashes their beatbox, their music box, etc., and all that, and said, that's the sound of losing. It's just silence. I'm a little bit like that. I'm one of those people. You celebrate the good things, but the bad things. But on the other side of things, it was a good win. Well, I would say any win's a good win against Italy. And there's a lot of pressure on all these women's shoulders as well as the coach. So maybe just cut them a bit of a break, you know.
Yeah, yeah. We won't get too much into it. How he's
Yeah,
going to watch
yeah,
it,
exactly.
but there is. I think it's an interesting talking point. It did remind me of Italy 2 years ago, but I would say Wales, as in Italy men's side, sorry, in the Principality Stadium a couple of years ago when they celebrated beating Wales, but ended up with a wooden spoon. But it's rather different circumstances around that win to Wales women getting the first win of this Six Nations rather than a first win in 3 years or whatever it was at the time
Yeah,
for Italy men. But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was ending like a 3 or 4 year losing
Yeah,
streak in the
yeah,
Six Nations, and you know, before the tournament, no one was suggesting that Italy were going to be second, and we're
mm.
pushing to break into the top two teams. So that's where I was going with that. Any thoughts on either the on the games themselves, either Wales Italy or for Scotland Ireland, Craig?
I think it's difficult. I think Scotland fell into, we try our best to talk away from the men's game, and Scotland women are doing their best to not follow the traits of the men's game. Unfortunately, they fell completely into the Scotland way of rugby, and that is going into a game that you should win and faltering at the end of it. And I think it's very disappointing. I think it's a hugely disappointing end to a very, very, what I would call a good Six Nations for them. We are definitely like Wales were last year. We're on the up. And it's to get our first win in Italy, away in Italy, and our first win against Italy for 25 years. For us, it's been a very, very good season. We've seen a a very positive arc in skills and in player abilities ever since we've gone professional. So I really think they're on a very, very good journey. The Ireland game, I think a mixture of two things. I think the pressure it was a big game. I think it got to the women, but also I think Ireland came out and they wanted to win that so much, and they grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. There was a lot of calls with the referee. There was a lot of let's just say questionable tackles, etc., that were in the game. And I think Ireland just went out and did what Ireland men do as well, and that is absolutely take that win. They didn't just win it. They absolutely ground Scotland down. So yeah, fair play to them. They've had a great season. Ireland, they've really they've shown, especially considering they were in the weeds before, for the last few years. So it's going to be interesting next year's Six Nations.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
Carwyn, do you want to have some? You were working on the Wales Italy game, weren't you?
yeah. Can I talk about Ireland and Scotland just first? Because I'm going to be so negative about a win. No, I think one thing I'll say on Ireland is I think we've seen now a side that have got have had a chance to develop, but also had a chance to have their sevens players. And those sevens players, you're talking some incredible players. Parsons is a brilliant winger. You've got Eve Higgins, who's I think was one of the best centres in the tournament, and it was brilliant against Wales, annoyingly so. And then Scotland as well. You've got your brilliant back three, and I think obviously you had a couple of absentees in that back three, quite noticeably so on the weekend, didn't they, Scotland? So I think that probably played a part. I think then you go to the Wales Italy game, and it was basically what you'd expect, which was a side that were interesting and throwing the ball around, and playing good rugby and attacking really well against a side that basically went back to what they're good at, which was Wales, and they went back to their forwards, and all three tries come through the front three, and it's a tale as old as time: forward power versus attacking flair, and it was an exciting game to watch because of that. what frustrates me is this was meant to be a Six Nations where we developed the backs. I think if anything, they've gone backwards with the backs. I think the backs haven't offered enough. Have really been perhaps having the platform they've had in previous years, and then also aren't running onto the ball in the way that they should be, or the passes are going to ground, or like you watch against France and interceptions were easy, and then you watch against Ireland and there was no structure in the attacking play. And I thought at least in France there's a bit of structure in the attacking play, playing off Fakey. I thought again on the weekend it was just at times it was cobbled together, the attacking play, and it just seems. At times you look at it and go, what has been coached in that back division? Because they're spending so much time together, they're more professional and all this sort of thing. And all that's positives. But if that's the case and they're ending up with seemingly an unstructured attack where the balls are hitting the ground or hitting the deck all the time, and it's not just raw skills doing that, it's structural play, then you've got to question it. I think that's my main gripe, and I appreciate that's being negative on a podcast after a win, but I think there were a lot of things that needed to be improved, and I don't think this Six Nations we've seen enough development in that backs division as yet to justify some of the decisions made during the Six Nations and before the Six Nations.
I think one of the things I think that's surprised a lot of people is because Johan Cunningham, quite rightly, decided to take the core of the Gloucester Hartpury team that he could select. Obviously, there's plenty of players he couldn't.
Yeah.
Who were absolutely tearing up the POA, PWR, Power, Premiership Rugby, whatever you want to call it. But then it just didn't translate, and I don't know if it's just because, is it as simple as because they didn't have Mo Hunt at 9 and Emma Singh at 15? That goes wrong. I don't think it helped that you had Fakey George paired with either Kira Bevan or Sean Jones, just on constant rotation. Young Cunningham couldn't make his mind up whether he wanted Kira Bevan as his starter or his impact player, and I think that caused him problems. I don't think he's worked out what he wants to do with the back five. He's decided you've got to have Alexander, you've got to have Natalia John, you've got to have Abby Fleming, you've got to have Georgia Evans, and then you had to have Alicia Butchers in there as well. And then he sort of cobbled the back five. I mean, I thought Georgia Evans played brilliantly, and she made the Opta team of the tournament based on statistics. Which big fan of me. I'm a huge fan of Georgia Evans because I'm that contrary. Bristol and Gloucester Hartpury dominate all the in terms of wealth representation. I picked the one bloody Saracen, which is not often I'm the one picking the Saracens player. But yeah, the really thing that frustrated me was how bad the defence looked. Because it looked like they hadn't done any work on their defence since WXV1, and we were just being cut up so easy. I mean, Scotland's 2 try. I think Scotland should have beaten us by more in that game. I'm pretty sure we talked about it last time we were on the pod, Craig, that if Scotland had kept going to the width instead of trying to outpower Wales, they'd have easily racked up 30 points, I think, because there were plenty of times, even against Italy, where our widest defender was in between the goalposts. And and that's not like because they've been picking and going driving in. That's just like on a first phase. And I know some teams like that wide defence, but I feel like our backs aren't pacey enough to recover when they get outside, and it just feels like they've just said this is our defensive system, and they've not changed it in 2 years.
Yeah, I think the issue though, and I think if you look at the two teams, I might be saying this, and then it turns around we have a flat year, the difficult second album as such, come along next year. But what it comes across is that the WRU have gone, look, we're paying the players. Look, here we go, we're paying the players. They're now professional players, and well, go and win then. And I think it just seems that there's no cohesion there. Just as you said, defence and the back play, it seems that they're relying on a Tuipulotu to come in and get them a win. And this, whereas, for example, with Scotland, what we are seeing at the moment is they've got similar players playing in strong, in very specific positions like Thompson at 12. You've got Mattison at 9. You've got the same front row with a few additions here and there now and then, but you've got similar players that have been playing in the bad days where the ball coming out into the backs was ponderous, and they were each either the ball was too high for them being passed at their head or it was being passed at their toes, and they've become professional players. And Brian Easton seems to have, brought them on. Their defence is Scotland's defence is very, very strong at times. There are times they go missing, but they could have had, if they'd had a bad day, they could have probably had an 80 odd score against England. But they didn't. They managed to, still a terrible score, but their defence was better. Their back work, the passing is hugely better. They're a different. You would think they're a different team, but actually, when you see them, there's the same spine of the specific players. So I think just the upskilling with the of the players with going professional has really brought them on, and I think that's where Wales. That's where it's almost to the point with the WRU, and I don't mean this wrong. I'm not one for calling for people's heads or get people losing their job, etc. But this is where what they've done in Scotland is they've invested in saying, right, this is your coach, and this coach is going to be here, and he is going to develop you for a period of time. It seems like Wales have found the Wales coach a job, if you know what I mean. And one of the Scotland women who Lisa Martin came on our pod, who's Scotland captain a few years ago, and she said, we want a coach coaching Scotland women who thinks that the pinnacle of their job is coaching Scotland women, not it's not a stepping stone to coach either a professional men's team or Scotland men. And I think that's the difference. I think what Wales needs, and Scotland are lucky enough. Brian Easton he's been involved in the men's game for many, 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 many years. But it looks like he's found his place. I think Wales need to find someone who all they want to do is coach Wales women, and build a team around that area. That would help anyway.
I think I get where Craig's coming from it. With Yohan, I think that was a question a couple of years ago. Because there were rumours at the time that he was going to go back to Wales in 20s or go to Scarlets. He then signed a new contract. I do feel he's committed. I really do. It's around him. I'm not so sure. If I'm honest. I think and there are the Gloucester question comes up, and the Gloucester question is very interesting, and how the Gloucester side play, and also how those players are performing, particularly Shaky. By the way, I thought Shaky had a best game of the tournament against Italy, but how Shaky performs in the Premiership under the guidance of someone like Sean Lynn, who is Welsh. That's what causes questions to be asked of Yohan, and adds to the questions, because if you've got a coach under pressure, the first question is, who do you bring in next? Well, if you've got the guy who's won 13 out of 13, won the Premiership last season, always coaching a few of those players, getting them to play well, and is also Welsh, well, that answers your question, doesn't it, to be honest? I think for me, it's you say about developing players and things like that, and there's been a bit of questions whether Wales have been complacent. There's been questions of whether they stagnated. To me, almost the backs have gone backwards. That's harsh, but I think that's fair. I really do, and I think some of that is down to playing young players. Jenny Hesketh, 22, is very young, and she's coming through, and yeah, she's made mistakes in this tournament. Sian Jones has made mistakes in this tournament. Both have clearly got high potential, and particularly I've been very impressed with Sian Jones at times. But I think some of the more experienced players having their best tournaments as well. You look at your Hannah Joneses, you look at your Jazz Joyces. Jazz Joyce was dropped, well, maybe not dropped for a game because it was the England game or France game, sorry, I should say. And sometimes you rotate, but I think think they haven't had their best tournaments, and they would say so themselves. But it's you look at certain positions. Centre for me is the big one, and I go, well, who else do you pick? When Karen Lake got injured and Hannah Jones is your centre partner, I thought, right, well, okay, Hannah Black at 12 is a steady player and played reasonably okay against Italy. Doesn't do anything flashy, but doesn't do anything that causes me to go, oh my god, you're not up to this level. But then you've got other players that I think one player they're massively missing and through injuries, Meg Webb. Meg Webb a year or two ago out in against New Zealand was blinking great. Like, creating breaks in the World Cup. She was running through gaps. She had pace, power, everything you'd want in a centre, good distribution as well. Sadly, then does her ACL, hasn't quite got back to the level she might do. But if you think about it, she did her ACL at a similar time to Alicia Butcher's, and Alicia Butcher's best game of the Six Nations was against Italy. So hopefully she's on a similar progression line and will come back to her best form then, because I think we are missing something big in the centres, or not something big, but someone who can do something a bit different, a bit more exciting than what we've got currently, if I'm honest. And then hopefully then we can find the right back three balance to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show we don't really like. At no point did Kingham really have a centre on the bench. I think when Karen Lake got injured,
says a lot about Karis Cox's versatility.
They moved Cox in. So,
yeah.
Although I think she filled in at 12 quite well.
Yeah, well, she plays centre for a club, doesn't she? So that.
Then maybe we start playing her there, and use some of our great back three player, the good back three players there. That's just a weird thing that I'm a big fan of, playing players in their positions.
Yeah, come on now, Harley. What is this magic that you're talking about?
Playing fullbacks at 10 or second rows at 6.
Hey, listen, that fullback that played at 10, is it? I don't know if any of you listen to our pod.
Can we just say that fullback who played at 10 that now plays for Toulouse?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like,
if you need to pinch yourself, and if you're not aware, we are on about Blair Kingham.
If you ever listen to our podcast, I have a wee giggle every day, every podcast, because I still have to say Blair Kingham plays in Toulouse. But hey, listen, he's doing very well there as well. So I can't. I have
a similar thought with the fact Lee Halfpenny will be starting for the Crusaders this weekend. It's like Lee Halfpenny, the Crusaders player. You're like, what? I know they're definitely they're a completely different team this season, but still,
they're just like polar opposites, aren't they? Like, I'm trying to think of other polar opposite. They're like other things that you'd go, hold on, that just doesn't fit.
Jared Evans for the Springboks.
Yeah, great shout. Great shout.
There you go. That might be our thing we put out with the pod.
That's a great.
What player seems the most bizarre for our team stereotype?
Yeah. Audrey Jones at Springboks jumps to mind as well for some reason. But anyway.
But just one last bit on coaching before we move on to having to talk about that game. I do think we were talking about the pod how young Cunham seems to all the players have bought into him, and he seems to be very good at the player management side of things. So, and Philippa Tutti made a great point on the Scrum 5 podcast that actually replacing a coach is a bit of a meh thing, but adding a coach is actually probably where we're looking at. Maybe what we need is some extra resources, which is the thing we didn't talk about it because the news came out, and then we had the match out pod. But obviously the £3 million investment, which I'm still not sure is 3 million for each of the 4 nations or 3 million total. But the WRU are looking at using it to put into these pathway coaches. So that should be probably good. I don't know what Scotland are doing. Is it resources?
It's pathway as well. It's 3 million per nation, and Scotland are using it for pathway, etc. But we have if any of you have read the comments of Richard Cockrell regarding Scotland rugby, he's unfortunately hit the nail bang on the head. There's an awful lot of deadwood within Scottish rugby, and there's a lot of people who aren't performing, who are still in jobs that have just moved sideways. And I think, unfortunately, having £3 million invested into the SRU it's going to pay a lot of those people still to do their poor job. But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be fair. The only reason he's not seen about the WRU is because he was coach for Edinburgh, not someone like Scarlets or Ospreys or Dragons.
Yeah,
I think he'd be saying the exact same thing.
perhaps because a lot of the WRU ones have gone because of various scandals and things in the last few
Have
years.
they though? A lot of the big names
No,
have
no,
gone.
it's
There's
true.
still plenty of others in there.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
very true.
moving on. Also, just before we do, one last point on the women's game. So obviously, Scotland qualified for WXV2, so they can start off being the two-time WXV2 champions. Wales still have to do a playoff with Spain on a yet to be determined date. What we do know is that will be at Cardiff, that game, for the right to play in WXV2, or we'll be ended up in 3 with the likes of Kazakhstan.
Well,
So,
just as long as they take Spain seriously, because Spain are a bar of soap for many a team. So they have to make sure let's just make sure they take Spain seriously.
Spain don't have to call us out boxing style to get a game against us as well.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Call that as the women's game. It's a bit different. Yeah, I mean, actually, it's quite interesting because I bumped into a Scottish and I'm presuming Edinburgh fan down at the Principality when I went to the Wales game. Did the Wales game, then I went to the Cardiff Edinburgh game. I was very impressed because he caught my eye, and I think he was surprised that he decided because he was in a he was in a Scottish World Cup jersey for World Cup 2021. So I said, "Oh, do you follow him?" He even went out to New Zealand, which is quite impressive. But he's like, "Oh, you'll do Spain." I went, "Mate, you haven't watched the Women's Rugby Europe Championship. Spain are very, very good.
Yeah, Spain
and they're very, very good in the exact area that Wales are very bad at, which is defending out wide.
Yeah,
and they're very good at attacking it.
They overturned Scotland a couple of times at home. So yeah, you have to be careful with Spain.
That's the last one. But yeah, so hopefully, I mean, there might be another chance to go for that. I'm not going to talk about the stage in Principality. I'll be honest, it felt empty.
Yeah,
only 10,000 people. I don't know what it looked like on TV, but inside didn't feel good. It was really weird looking, like a completely empty wall.
Mm-hmm.
I joked on the Rap podcast. It must be what Ospreys fans feel like week in, week out.
Well, Edinburgh fans used to have that with Murrayfield, and they would fill up the east stand for the TV, and then the rest would be it'd be empty, completely empty. It's a weird one, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last time I was at Liberty was quite full, mate. Granted, that was for varsity, and it was for.
I wasn't going to bring that one up. We get enough abuse from Ospreys fans whenever you bring up attendances. Speaking of saying which, had probably about a similar attendance just next door in Cardiff Arms Park. We had Cardiff hosting Edinburgh for our last home game. Farewell Sir Josh Turnbull. Last game's on the pitch for Ellis Jenkins. Last home game for Rhys Carey. Needless to say, like most times when a Welsh team makes a big celebration event of a game, it did not go well. Shall we start with positives on that game? In which case, I'm going to go to Craig.
I'm the wrong person to come to, because if you've been following me on Twitter and both you guys know exactly how I feel about Edinburgh at this moment in time, there's not much positive from me at the moment with Edinburgh. But anyway, that's a different story. Oh no, it won't be. I'll be telling you all about it.
Was it on this? It wasn't on this pod, was it, Harley? It was on the. It must have been on the Welsh pod where someone asked me, "Oh, who do you think Cardiff will win on the weekend?" I went, "Well, Edinburgh are rubbish. Like, they are horrible to watch. They play terrible rugby. Oh, Cardiff will win. Cardiff will win that game." Of course, I'm wrong. I still stand by Edinburgh to play terrible rugby.
That was my first predicted Cardiff win since the New Year's Day game. Oh, so
yeah,
not New Year's Day game. Since Boxing Day.
Yeah. Cardiff can be incredibly strong when they have some powerful, quick wingers. They have, if they break your defensive line, you're not really going to pick them up again. They're going to score a try. Edinburgh at the moment are very like Wales women. They are incredibly poor in the backs at the moment. They've got no spark. The forwards are keeping them alive at this moment in time. And I can go into it, but at the if you watch the Scarlets game, the first half of the Scarlets game is exactly how Edinburgh play. I think they ended up realizing that they're at home and they better get their finger out and get this sorted out. And we all on the Scottish Rugby podcast, we all thought that Sean Everett had gone in like wrestling style and started smashing up smashing people across the back over their backs with a foldy chair and things like that. Because he's so quiet and so mild mannered, and I'm waiting on him exploding but I think he's come in and said that he wants to build strength and durability in the Edinburgh squad and get them playing like South African teams. And we don't do that. And it shows, we've got some, we've got some phenomenal, we've gone to games that we've come away with either a loss or a 4 point game rather than a 5 point game with a team full of internationals. And we are incredibly blunt. We have lost all flair. Even no matter what you say about Mike Blair, even Richard Cockrell at the time when he first joined Edinburgh, we were exciting to watch. And you were going into games expecting a win. I went into the weekend expecting Edinburgh to be beaten by Cardiff because Cardiff can be a banana skin. Well, the Dragons, no, so can Scarlets. The only team that we don't seem to expect to be beaten by in Wales is Ospreys.
Which is weird. They're the best.
Yeah, it just seems to be, because God help them. We go down to Dragons on a wet Sunday night and we get beaten and things like that. It's just Edinburgh incredibly dull at the moment. They score their tries through their forwards at the moment. Okay, fair enough. Bill Matta's try was actually, hold on, was it against Cardiff or was that Scarlets? But it was a few backs moves and then he finished it up. But yeah, the only exciting bit for me for the Cardiff game was Lewin De Bruyne skipping over the top and flailing away to get that last try. But yeah, it's an odd one.
I think it says something about how Edinburgh played and actually how the game sort of went in itself. That the second top carrier for both sides, was Bill Matter.
Yeah,
and he was only on for about half an hour.
Yeah,
which it says a lot of how Edinburgh changed and what beat us. I thought Duhan was great value, especially after his yellow card. The way obviously typical Arms Park, they will boo the opposition for anything, and so he's geeing him up. And I just thought I'd play to him, and actually I felt slightly sorry for him at the end of the game. Not for anything bad, but basically so many people wanted to take photos with him or get things signed that the ground security had to grab him and escort him off the pitch. Otherwise, he was going to miss the Edinburgh bus. Which I just thought was brilliant. But I thought he had good. I thought his battle with Mason Grady was actually really good when Grady moved up to the win. Rhys Carey took his try well, but I don't know about you, Cohen. Do you think that you're going to be saying the same things we normally say on this podcast in the down things? But for me, I feel like we gave away too many penalties at the wrong time, and our attack just didn't seem to work right when it needed to. We seem to be very good at getting into the Edinburgh 22 and then not so good at doing anything with it.
Yeah, I must admit it's one of the. I realise this is really bad when you go on a Cardiff podcast, but it's one of the few games of rugby I didn't see over the weekend. I had to catch up a bit, so I knew the result when I was watching it, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall again. It's the same old, isn't it? Really. You've got your key moments. The Duhan tackle and Mason is obviously a big one. Got other moments and things like that, but the attack one is an interesting one. I think you look at where Cardiff have been most interesting last couple of weeks, and I think I called it before the Ulster game, didn't I say? I said something like, a attack play off the back of a line out, Theo Cabango scores. That's not me having completely the Midas touch. It's a mix of me knowing Ulster's tail gunner is Tom Stewart. And also Cardiff score a lot off the back of lineouts in that phase of play, in similar phases of play, because I think partly because of good play design, and it's a good play design to get carry through to score, but partly because we're not scoring tries in other ways as much as perhaps Cardiff were at the start of the season. Yeah, I think for me it's the same old, and it is getting frustrating because I do think that's a winnable game. Like I joked about it earlier, saying that Edinburgh are a bad team. They're not a bad team, but they're also not a great one. At home, that's a team that you should be beating. Really, you should be beating them, and as much as possibly it's not doing Ospreys a favour, which is probably a bad one for Erie and a good one for us. But on the flip side, then, yeah, those are games you should be winning at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought, I'm quite glad that Jockey sort of decided that 6-2 is right for Cardiff. Unfortunately, it backfired a little bit for us with the injuries to Ellis and Harry Millard quite early on. Pretty gutting for how Ellis to finish his last home game. Took a head knock. He was quite open about it on Scrum 5 that he basically said he felt groggy, he couldn't shake it off, and he chose to take himself off. Which after 30 minutes isn't great, but kudos to him. He did. He was quite open, saying maybe as a younger player I wouldn't have done that. But it's good to know that at least players are starting to take, if World Rugby themselves aren't taking concussions seriously, players are starting to look after themselves a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, so long as he's the rule and not the exception. Just put that out there.
This is what we got to get onto. Is hopefully more players, but we are seeing more players.
Yeah, the only reason I say it is because I Ellis is a very self-aware human being and a smart human being who's right at the end of his rugby career and is retiring from rugby because he wants to be able to look after his kid and all, and a lot of those things. So if as long as he's the rule and not the exception, it's a good sign. But I'm not convinced he is at the moment.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've been very negative on this point. Sorry, but I think that's a fair point to make.
That did lead to a very weird midfield, though. Obviously, with Harry Millard going off as well. I was just saying, what did you think of a midfield of Tinas, Beetham, and Thomas? So you've got three basically crash ball 10s in their own way. Also, Tinas to be a shout out to him because he topped the turnovers for the game. He had 3 turnovers at number 10, and I love it.
Yeah, with Jamie Ritchie on the park, it's just like, yeah.
Well, you had him and Mish.
Yeah.
You had him, Mish, Ellis Jenkins, and Thomas Young, and it's still number 10 who got the most turnovers. I just love that. Yeah. Any stand-up players from either side for either of you two?
I think Healy's finally, well, Healy is a game of two halves. Healy is someone who, with Ali Price, just falls through the gaps. He's someone who Ali Price is so slow nowadays and so trying to control the game. And every time I see Ali Price getting selected to start, I sigh and just go, hold my head in my hands. And he's signed for another year now with us. So I find that difficult. But then Healy with Velicott on the park is a different player. What I like to see is Healy kicking these. He had a few games at the beginning of the season where he'd left his boots in the changing room and he wasn't kicking very well, but he's starting to get there again. But Healy needs, I think from what I can tell, he needs a regular 9 beside him, and he doesn't seem to get on very well with Ali Price's game at the moment, whereas with Velicott, he knows, if it's the same thing with Blair Kinghorn when he was playing at 10, because they're big lads and they can get through on a soft shoulder and get their hands free and pass the ball around the back of the player, etc. I would say that that Healy needs a fast ball, needs quick ruck speed. He doesn't need control. He needs a little bit more chaos to really shine. Whereas, unfortunately, Ali Price gives him control and telegraphs because he telegraphs what we're going to do to to the team that we're playing against, and just little things like that where Healy doesn't really shine. Healy needs a little bit more chaos as such to really shine. So, but I enjoy watching him. He plays incredibly well. Bill Mata always shines, and we're going to really, really miss him next year. Even though Magnus Bradbury's coming back from Bristol, and Magnus has been, and yeah, I can see Carwyn's laughing at me here because there's in the Scottish Rugby podcast that I seem to be the only person that's really a big fan of Magnus Bradbury. So I'm a big fan of Maggie, and I think I'm glad he's coming back to Edinburgh. He
Let's
has
put it
been
this way:
performing
as
very
a
well.
Bristol fan, I'm happier with the side of the trade.
Yeah. Well, you see, I think Maggie's done well for Bristol. I think he's a better
Yeah,
player. But
but
Bill
Bill
Mata's
Mata.
just, oh yeah, Bill Mata. I'm surprised though. You look at Bill Mata when he was playing for Fiji, and he plays for us. When he plays for us, it just seems like he starts from the 22, and you're on the 10 meter, in the opposition's 10 meter, and he just seems to just build this run up, and he's just used as a battering ram. And I think to myself, do you not get a bit fed up, Bill? But we've got a little bit on the beginning of our podcast where he puts that pass into Jimmy Johnson. The Edinburgh when he's playing for Edinburgh. I'm trying to think who we were playing against anyway, and he just does this offload that is just from the gods. And I just think to myself, if he's going to go to any team that he's going to be able to do more of that it's going to be Bristol, So we're going to miss him, but he played incredibly well, and also the big man, Pierre Schumann. We just, I have to say, again, the love affair continues.
Yeah, I'd say before I get your plays, I just want to say as you brought up Shu, I thought Azarati did so well against Schumann. Like we managed to buy some stuff out of that Edinburgh scrum to keep us in the game. So I thought it was going to be very bad, very with that VP Nell and Schumann on.
Yeah, I think VP is starting to show his age now, finally. And we used to expect that when VP came on the field, you were just going to get scrum penalty after scrum penalty. Schumann's the other way around. If Schumann's having a bad game, he will give away penalties on a regular basis. And so I think Azarati just managed to get the edge on him. But where Schumann really shines, apart from when he is scrummaging well, is in the loose play. And I think he does incredibly well on that. So and a lot. Oh, I'll tell you another one is and his name's just gone completely out of my head because Ewan Ashman. He is a very, very good hooker. He's coming on really, really well. And even though he runs like he's gliding along, and he seems to, he's got an odd run on him. But I'll tell you what, he's doing incredibly well for Edinburgh as well as Scotland. So yeah.
No, you make it. It reminds me more of a back running than like a back three player. Like you get some of those effortless. Like Damien. Well, not so much Penno. Penno looks like he's on fire half the times. But
different.
I
was
think
say those. Like, so like this. When you get some wingers and they just seem to glide along. Like Ashman reminds me of that.
I think
And
he
then
looks
you
more
see him
like
like
one of
do a
these.
close up carry and he smashes you, and you're like, fuck.
Yeah, I think he's more like one of those sim characters that when they're walking along a computer game, they look like they're walking, but actually they're gliding. I think he's got that sort of that bit of yeah. Anyway, I digress.
Anyway, Cohen, who stood out for you during that game? Doesn't have to be Edinburgh. Doesn't have to be Cardiff players. Can be some of the Edinburgh players.
Yeah, I think it'd be Edinburgh players, to be honest. I think what's made me laugh is a couple of weeks ago, I said something about Duan running sideways and not being very good to my girlfriend, and ever since he's been brilliant. Every time I've seen him since,
Stop commenting on the opposition, Carwyn.
So Duan is a magnificent rugby player, and he's one of the best has ever been. I'm just not a fan. I've never been. I'm trying to stay clear to that, and it's not really working. I think, what made me laugh there about Magnus Bradbury. I actually think he's a good player as well, but it's just that I know Craig is a huge fan, so I was wondering if it's partly Craig's fan mail that's brought him back to Edinburgh rather than anything else. But yeah, I think look at that game and you think the same thing, which is tight five. I actually was surprised, as you said, Harley, that Cardiff held up mostly well enough, because I think of Schoeman, I think of and I echo Craig's thoughts on Ashman. I think he's a huge potential player with a massive ceiling. But I was surprised that it held up well. It's just some reason, and partly the injuries, because that centre combination isn't right, as you mentioned, Harley. It's not the right centre combination, and it's probably the last one you'd want as a Cardiff fan. But it's difficult to say that players played that brilliantly. I don't know if you feel any differently, but it seemed to be a performance that just petered out, and therefore the majority of the team petered out, really.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Mason Grady had a great game. I thought when he was in the centre, he sort of held well.
Yeah.
I think whenever Duhan ran at Mason, Mason got him down, but then equally, I think Duhan got him back. And so I think it's bit, I think Duhan's big breaks came when he sort of popped up in the middle and he cut through there. I don't think, so that's a good thing for Mason going forward, because that's probably one of his biggest work on areas is his defence. His actual tackling technique's great. It's just his decision making usually, although maybe on the wing it's a little bit easier. But yeah, I don't think stand out. I thought Alex Mann had a great game. I thought he was always good, but I mean, I feel like I don't know if that's just my Alex Mann fan club sunglasses tinting me, but no.
Sorry, I'm chair of that society, aren't I?
I am president. I am the president chair and sole member.
We're
I'm too selfish to open it up to anyone.
I don't know. We'll have a fight over that one. I'm up there as well. I feel like we need a re-election, to be honest.
But yeah, it was great to see him used as a line-out option a lot more, because I said it's something that he can do, and I feel like, and almost a bit like the Justin Tipuric, that if you want safe ball, he's, a lot of people complain about size, but you can get him up into the air quite easily. And
he's Pom, isn't he? That's how I see him. Peter O'Mahony, what he needs to get into his game is being as good defensively in the line out as Pom is.
Yeah, I mean, if he could be a bit nastier as well, which is something I think we always say about Cardiff.
Yeah, I was going to
nasty ones.
There's a word I would use, but I'm not going to use it on your podcast. But he needs to be more...
You can use whatever word you like on there. There's no watershed.
No, Peter O'Mahony. Yeah, if he's there's no.
I feel like it's synonymous with that word anyway, so you can.
Yeah. Peter O'Mahony is just I can't. I'm not bringing myself to use it, but it's. I see you next Tuesday. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So other than that, I think I just thought with Alex Mann, it's nice seeing him have good performances, especially after all the praise Tame Plumtree's been getting over the other side, on the far side of the locker, and you're like,
sorry,
Alex Mann doesn't get injured after 5 games.
Led by. Call him out.
What, Hugh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Catboy. So he does everything better, and you went, does he though? Because I definitely saw a few rucks where he should have been hitting them, and he just sort of went.
I love that.
It's just the line.
Oh, he does everything. Oh, does he though? Does he really? Does he really?
I'll admit Alex Mann isn't the full package at 6 yet, but I wouldn't say Tame Plumtree is as far and away ahead the 6 Wales need just yet. Especially when you look over the bridge and you see Christian that actually is playing very well. And the best thing is, Rob Bax has been playing him in the second row and at 6, not at 7. He's not been going for his dual blindsides, which makes me very happy.
I hate dual blindsides. Sorry, it's so much. It was like seeing the worst one. I think has to be seeing Dan Lydiate line up in a 7 jersey for Racing. I just remember thinking, what have you done to him? Like, what have you done to our beautiful Dan Lydiate?
If you're doing the sort of Argentina, South Africa thing and your open sides playing 6, that's fine. But some of the packs extra had, and you'd have, was it Janus Kirsten, who was basically a 7, and he'd be in the second row and Chunzo would be at 7. It's just like, use the big lump in the row, please.
We get the same feeling when Sam Skinner gets wheeled out. We have the same thing. Just put him in the row. I'd rather he's just in the row. Just get him in there and that'll be fine.
I know. He's such a good second row as well. Like, just leave him there. Him and Gilco are great.
Yeah, I think we've got a guy. I don't know if but Glenn Young is becoming very much the Grant Gilchrist. He gets penalised for lying in the rucks all the time. Gets penalised for not rolling away, penalised for going for ball when he shouldn't, penalised for high tackles. Well, he's just fantastic that way. He's penalised on a regular basis. He's become in my family's. He's got a new name in my family. Both myself and my son go fucking Glenn Young, and it just seems to be the thing, because that's what he is.
I'm not going to name and shame, but there's we have one. Well, potentially a second. The next coming of that player at Cardiff as well, which me and Carwyn have spoken off here about with some of the conversations he's had with ex-Cardiff players.
Yeah, there's not just one of them. There's a couple of them, I think, to be honest.
I mean, Cardiff are just
anyway.
Cardiff have plenty of players like that, but yeah, it's I think I said last bit of business now. So obviously no URC rugby and no Cardiff no Cardiff representation in Europe, because if you saw the teams who were playing, of course we didn't make it to the knockouts. But the Rags are playing the Welsh Premiership semi-final against Llandovery Saturday. That's a 5:15 kickoff. On the Rags Twitter page at Cardiff_RFC, they've been advertising coaches. I don't know if there are any spaces left, but please do. I think it's 15 quid and it's a big jolly up and down. Otherwise, it is being broadcast on S4C, coverage starting from 5 o'clock. Anything you'd like to add, Carwyn?
No. Yeah, I do. Sorry. But yeah, it should be a good one. I think Cardiff have hit form at the right time. You look at last season where they were top of the league and then they got pipped at the death by Llandovery, and they'll be looking to do the same thing. But I did put that to. I spoke to Griff Rhys earlier in the week. I was going to say Griff Rhys of this podcast fame, but he's a bit bigger than us. But anyway,
friend of the pod, Griff Rhys. Right,
friend of the pod, Griff Rhys. That's a better way of saying it. It's rather than bigging ourselves up too much. But no, yeah, Griff Rhys, and he said, Llandovery are clear favourites, and they are. They're top of the league. They've been brilliant all season. Cardiff, but he did at the same time think he's excited about Cardiff's prospects and think they've got a good chance and a good game plan to worry Llandovery. You know what Llandovery are going to bring. Big pack, Lee Evans at scrum half, and then they do have some exciting backs if you give them an opportunity. It's about trying to match them up front, and that's going to be the difficulty, of course. But I do expect it to be tighter, perhaps, than the game when they played at the Arms Park a few months ago. Because I don't think perhaps Llandovery are the all-consuming force they were at that point, and I think Cardiff are on the up from that point. So it should be somewhere near the middle. Llandovery are still clear favourites, and I do expect they will get the win. But I think it's a massive growth from the start of the season. The other thing Griff Rhys was saying was, start of the season, they didn't know if they'd have a full squad. They just didn't know if they'd have a squad because of ex-players retiring, players leaving to Jersey and other places. And then you've got, obviously, when 3 or 4 of your squad are in Wales jerseys by the end of the following, midway through the following seasons, that says what happened with players going up to the regional side. So, yeah, it should be a good game. I'm really excited about both games. I think that probably will be the closer of the semi-finals as well. Although Evervale think otherwise, but I do think Newport should run away with that one against Evervale as well.
And we need a Newport Cardiff final so that Ray Lilo can get his belated game against Newport.
You're going to keep harping on about that. He'll retire about 6 years later and he'll say, Ray, better get that game you were supposed to play against Newport.
It's fine. After all the complaints from some Dragons fans, Ben Carter is supposedly playing for Newport this weekend.
Oh, for goodness. No, anyway, no comment.
So this is one of the things that seems to have been happening in Wales with Premiership sides. The Welsh Premiership have been used to get ban reductions.
You use this up in Scotland, Craig? Seen this?
Yeah, we.
Jones playing for Boromir Bears.
Yeah, we've seen a few different players play that way. I think Xander Fagerson, if I remember correctly, played for one of the teams. I think well known. Either that or I think, or it was. I don't remember the game, but he managed to get himself sorted. I think he played for a Glasgow A game or something like that to to get his ban reduced or whatever it was. So yeah, it's just I don't know. It's difficult because you're trying to teach people a lesson and trying to get them sorted out, but then obviously people like Xander Fagerson, who we desperately need in the front row, we want them back, and we complain about other nations doing it all the time, and then when it comes to our nation, we go, yeah, but it's okay for us, you know. So yeah, it's just the way it is, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as long as they're not on the same weekend, it's not horrendous. I've seen that
Yeah,
done before.
that Lozano one was just hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know if you
yeah,
saw
anyway.
Scarlett's play. Was supposedly playing for Llanelli on the Friday and Scarlett's on the Saturday. You know,
We
like
see,
I'm pretty sure in pro rugby they've got to have a 2-day mandatory standout.
yeah, we don't have we have that up here. You know, you're not allowed to play for two different teams or two. You're not allowed to play twice in 48 hours. So
Unless you're
Yeah.
Brock Harris, who seems to do it for you manage to play Curry Cup and URC in like the
yeah,
same day,
yeah, it's
which
odd.
is mad. But anyway, are there any games, anything coming up on Scottish Rugby Pod you wanna plug before we sign off?
Nothing really. Just we've got a new squad of us because Cammy has retired or taken early retirement. So there's a few of us that come in and do the hosting a little bit. We've got a tomorrow night we do again like you've just done. We've got a Sky Wilson who writes for the blog. She's coming on to take apart the Six Nations performance and talk about that. And then in the future, we are going down. There will be an offshoot like yourselves. There may be an Edinburgh Rugby podcast appearing. So to keep an eye out for that. There may be a little bit, just a half an hour chat every week about the games that's coming up and what's going wrong with Edinburgh as we always do, and that's about it. But yeah, if I'm at Scrum Champion, if you want to follow me on Twitter and hear all about scrummaging and how much I love it and how much Magnus Bradby and Pierre Schumann are fantastic, you can follow me and listen to that.
Absolutely. And if you like what you hear from Craig, feel free to follow at Scott Rugby Pod and at Scott Rugby Blog for the
Yeah,
for the
it's really good of Harley to actually do the plugging that I should be doing because I'm glad
it's
I'm
just
here,
what I'm
Harley.
only
You're the
doing it because
man.
I couldn't remember our own podcast thing, and the depressing thing is it's very simple.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah,
the Scottish Rugby blog one's simple as well, and I was too busy promoting myself on Twitter. Oh
yeah,
man, I
screw it.
tell
I
you.
mean, all the rest of them are Glasgow fans anyway, really. So
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
if you like what you hear from us, at Carwyn Journo, I think.
Yeah, I
Carwyn
think
H Journo.
Karen Journo, yeah. Sorry,
Carwyn Journo.
I should know. I should know that off the top of my head, but yeah, no.
You'll also find Carwyn on the Sport in Wales pod.
Well, yeah, behind the scenes, sort of messing around with that. I think we've got a boxing special coming up on Tuesday, so that should be good. But yeah, it's interesting. I think. Sorry to go off a tangent, but we did the whole chat about Johan Cunningham earlier and having fans support, and all I could think of was this is very reminiscent Rob Page having like player support in the camp in Wales football. So yeah, that's Sport in Wales podcast and Sport in Wales magazine and online as well.
Yeah, also on and I definitely can never remember this one, but he's also on the was it Rugby Pod Cymraeg or something?
Podcast Rugby Cymru. Yeah,
that one. Yeah. So if you want to hear it in God's tongue, I'm at Worthy Harley. That's the default. I haven't changed it. That's definitely how I put it on. You can find the podcast at Cardiff_Central or on Facebook. Also, feel free to like and subscribe to the Rap YouTube channel where we put out match and team announcement reactions, and you can get to see our wonderful faces. And there should be some other videos coming up soon. That Lee's hopefully working on behind the scenes. Where there'll be more about that when we get out. All that's left for me to say is thank you to Carwyn and thank you to Craig for listening to me rambling.
Thanks for having me. It's been really good. I always enjoy coming and talking to you guys. It's great to, and we'll have to make sure that we have you onto the Edinburgh. I'm already into that promoting a podcast that doesn't exist yet. Have you onto the Scottish Rugby podcast as well. But I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and it's nice to talk to you guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, thank you, Carwyn. Thank you all for listening. Ta-ra.
Bye all.
Diolch.